Simoneau. I'm the coordinator of community planning at the Paul Memorial Library. It is my great honor to welcome you to tonight's poetry reading, sort of fireside chat, celebrating April being National Poetry Month. Very excited to welcome two great poets with new work that have definite Lowell roots and river themes running through their works. First up is a man by the name of Brian Simoneau. He's the author of the award-winning book Riverbound, published by C&R Press. Has a new book forthcoming from Black Lawrence Press in June called No Small Comfort. His poems have appeared in lots of places, including Boston Review, Crab Orchard Review, Crazy Horse, Poet Lore, and Waxwing. Originally from Lowell, he lives near Boston now with his family, and we are very pleased to welcome Brian Simoneau. And you'll have to imagine the clapping.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Sean. Thanks for putting this together. I know this is a lot of work to corral all the technology and the links and all of this. I've been, like Matt, teaching largely on Zoom for a while, but this is my first chance actually to do a reading virtually, and I'm really excited to be here. So thank you, Sean, and thanks, Matt. This is fun. I've been loving your poems from afar for a while, and this is really great to be able to share this moment with you. I want to start by just reading maybe a couple poems from the first book, from Riverbound, and then I'll read some of the poems from the book that comes out really soon, and we'll see what else comes up along the way. This first poem is called North of Stinson Beach. A quartet of pelicans, like a measure of music in flight. Every wave crashing keeps the impossible rhythm. Erosion and decay under blue sky. Fog creeps closer to the coast, reminds me something's always about to happen. Every moment becoming a past we water down with each retelling. Every place another home we can't return to. Times like now, I don't know why I bother writing any of it down. There is no line between sea and sky. No telling when flow turns to ebb. Everything passes imperceptibly enough to be missed, unspeakably missed. The way our every breath becomes the air itself. Every winter, the sand stripped away by surging storms, brought back bit by bit, the sculpted rocks unrecognizable month to month. And yet every year, the snowy plovers return, their song never drowned out by the surf, this language of give and take, this language of grief. There's in this first book, there's quite a few poems about growing up in Lowell, about coming back to Lowell after having been gone for a long while. And this one seemed like a pretty good one to read here in April. And Sean and I were talking about Lowell youth baseball for a minute here when we hopped on Zoom. And this one actually talks about Flaggy's Field over in Pawtucketville, where I used to play a lot of my games in the PYO. Spring comes to Lowell. Like the moon lifting itself shadow by shadow over weary cities. Winter loosens its hold. Leaves potholes, rubbish crusted to mounds of soot-streaked snow and slush. At Flaggy's Field, kids unwind winter legs around the bases as the sun sets. Still too soon for everyone to get a chance to hit. A lonely woman walks along the swollen river where a cottonwood's scattering its seeds in search of fertile soil. There's no bird song on the breeze, but on the other bank, a freight train whistles something of arrival. Slowly, a living earth emerges through its shell. It falters, tentative, the way we begin to accept the dead aren't coming back. So that poem sort of, takes a turn. A lot of the other poems are elegies for my dad, who was born in Lowell, grew up in Lowell, and he died back in 2004. And so this book sort of came about in a lot of ways as I tried to process his loss. And I was really fortunate that the poet Arthur Smith saw something in these poems and decided that it would be published by C&R Press. And we lost Art a few years ago as well. Something I always love to do when I read, I tend to think of myself as an opening act, right? I'm opening for Matt tonight, and this is a great privilege. But I like to do covers as well, right? And so if you can imagine that I'm the opening band here, I'd like to do a cover, if that's okay. And I'd like to read a poem from Art Smith. I owe a lot to him. And if there's anything I can do to sort of pay that forward, I'm hoping sharing some of his work will do that. This is from his book, Orders of Affection, which came out back in 1996. And this is a poem called Here. Here. If meaning is the reason for mournfulness, I'm happy camping in the crowded restaurant, nursing decaf, bitter and oily, as one of the Sunday dusks fronting the end of the century unwinds in late springtime, Tennessee. Outside, the yellow mums quake in the wind, and while the willows weep and bow, evening seeps into the booth beside me. I have no thoughts, and I long for nothing other than being party to the light, which has come a long way to be here, if only for a moment, married to the shadows. I'm no longer frightened when I think of the scene without me, tomorrow or 40 years from now, as though it were tomorrow. Waitresses, young and rushing, bussing trays, men ringing the counter, talking as they eat, women arrayed in booths, children squalling, and in my seat, someone else. That's fair. And fair's a far better deal than I have any right to. Though that's a lesson harder learned than said. I've been watching one dove hopping in a dogwood branch by branch toward another, the other branch by branch retreating. I can't know its thoughts, but there appears to be no sadness in the one eye I can see, only the edge of whatever light is left as it glances away and then flies off over my head, which is the ceiling past which I can't see. So as Sean mentioned, I do have a new book that's coming out on June 1st. It's called No Small Comfort. It's coming out from Black Lawrence Press, and I'm very excited about these poems. My hope was to sort of transform some of the grief that I wrote about in Riverbound into something more positive, more sort of outward looking. And a lot of the poems that went into this book happened to coincide with my starting a family with my wife Tregony, and so a lot of these poems came from the time when our oldest daughter was very small, and that was a long time ago now. She's here. She's about to turn 13, which is wild to me. But I thought I'd read a couple of poems from that book, and I'll start with the title poem. This is a poem called No Small Comfort. Branches bare on Friday, managed to bud by Monday morning. My weekend hike beside a creek to find a centuries-old grindstone, not nearly as impressive as winter dormant blossoms, making their sudden yellow show against blue sky. My newest lines about seasons spinning into place with storm after storm, no match for photosynthesis, setting itself in motion again. Every tree spreads its leaves and converts the atmosphere to food using water and sunlight, feeding itself and releasing what I need to breathe. Me? In a couple of weeks, I can grow a beard that catches crumbs from a toasted steak and cheese. It's impossible, turning the corner to millions of these little flags, not to be impressed by a world that makes itself over each day. It baffles, befuddles to think of living, breathing creatures seeming all but dead all winter. One day flourishing colors and textures and odors I hardly recognize after months of shielding my eyes from the glare of snow and ice. Turning away from bare branches and the longing empty space between them makes. In a mind made numb by winter, it's easy to accept doing the same thing over and over and hoping for different results as a version of insanity. Really, it's no small comfort to know what grows before our eyes keeps going. Trees coming into bloom, or 2-day whiskers on my chin, or the skin on my hands scored by scars. Under all, there's little difference. In a world that cuts us, every last one of us, down, it's no small comfort to see what we see and be overcome. Here's a poem I wrote when we were expecting Amelia, and I was sort of grappling with what am I going to do? How do I do this? What will I say to her? What will I do when this child arrives? And I'd been sort of keeping notes about this, and I realized that I was doing something that might become a poem, and this is obviously a poem for Amelia and for my other daughters. It's also a poem for Pookie, and it's called "To My Child Before She Arrives." To my child before she arrives. There is a man you will learn to call uncle. He will teach you the answer to many questions is land bridge. There will be truth in what he says. He will call you something other than your name, no matter what your name is. No matter what your name is, you might not like it. It is likely you will have lots of hair, likely in places you would not expect. I have always tried to play up my love for bears. So even body fat seems tribute to mothers who kill to protect their young. I hope I would do the same. Let us see what happens. Whatever happens, most of us feel we were born too late, but really there are no good old days. Some days there will only be swallowed silence and sobbing. The world is not always kind and rarely makes sense. So when the sun goes down, we will sing our songs and talk about mourning. Mountain ranges rise from valleys and forests make them look green, but mountains are mostly gray underneath. Stone we will sometimes climb simply to stand on top of. Sometimes at sunset, it looks like mountain and cloud are the same. When it does, please sit with me and watch. Lakes are best for swimming and rivers for fishing, but oceans wash away feelings you cannot find names for. No matter what, drying your feet of cold water will make them feel better than you can imagine, especially after a day spent walking uneven ground. Reaching the end of days, it is common to ask, Why are we here? Where are we going? How do we get there? There are lots of answers. You will have to find most of them yourself. It will involve lots of walking on uneven ground. It might involve trying to walk across water. You could do worse than wet feet. There will be sobbing and silence, unkindness, love, and laughter. You could do lots worse. You could do lots. Do lots. With this chance finally to read poems with Matt, I had to promise a couple of people, of course, that there would be Lowell poems here. And so there are quite a few in the new book. And this one takes its title from an old Bob Dylan song. And it's called Watch the River Flow. I lived once where the river turns north, as if it could return to its source, climb the latitudes back through time and past the meeting of Pemigewasset and Winnipesaukee, come to the cliff where the old man lies in heaps of granite, gravity having won again. It always does. But still I'm caught off guard, a child who stacks whatever he finds, block on block, pebbles and rocks, the topple always a shock. I'd walk in spring and watch its cresting water fall over dams and locks, its constant drilling into bedrock, downhill run to continent's edge. I'd stop to study the spot where it turns and try to revise the maps, but only winds up flowing east to lose itself in seas, snow and rain diffused in the Gulf of Maine, and hauled away by currents and tides a mountain wouldn't imagine even if mountains could. A summit's slow erosion, nothing compared to an ocean's pounding, the steady pull of a moon. This one's another Lowell poem. So growing up in Lowell, my mom's family, my mom grew up here in Boston, and all of her family was here, including my grandparents. And so most Sundays we would, pile in the car and drive down to Boston for dinner at Gammon Pa's house. And we'd hang out for the afternoon, and then we'd, make the trip back up home. And we'd get off Route 3, we'd take the Lowell connector, and something about that moment, right, of coming off the Lowell connector onto Thorndike Street, right, as you're about to pass the YMCA, and that was how we knew we were home, right? If we had dozed off on the way, if it was dark, we might be looking at Christmas lights. That was home, right? That was sort of an arrival, and that feeling kind of never went away. And in my mind, right, like that, it looks exactly the way it always did, right? As you sort of turn that big round, bend off the highway. And so I wanted to try to capture that, knowing that it's never going to be like that forever. And so this is a poem that came from that, and it's called Thorndike Street. Thorndike Street, strangely never changes. Not enough to feel forgot, no matter how long I've stayed away, how prodigally I've strayed. Off the connector, exit wrapping around itself until the underpass opens up like time turning back. I'd swear the same matador's been sitting on the curb for 30 years. The factory outlet's comfort furniture, a promise of the minimum home might still provide. Even Gallagher Terminal's improvements make little difference. Name a train station that doesn't look decades old, and I'll buy your ticket to any misremembered place you want to return. Heading downtown, shiny signage reads of renewal. But surely this takes love. The same potholes patched again and again. The street signs naming a constant path home. I've got some other poems about the river, but I don't want to steal any of your thunder, Matt. I'm going to read one more for my daughters who are hanging out on that screen there, watching and listening. This is the poem I wrote originally for Amelia, our oldest, and then as Harper arrived, and then as Phoebe arrived, the poem was just as true for each of them. And so I think of this as a poem for all three of them. And it's called My Daughter Gathers Rocks Wherever She Goes. My daughter gathers rocks wherever she goes, as if she knows erosion to be the only constant, as if she could reverse it, only time and room to stack the limiting factors, as if she could hold the whole earth, the trick not finding the pieces, but fitting her fingers around them. Pockets filled, digging in grass for granite and quartz, rock after rock stacked on the pudding stone, poking from hilltops, glaciers left behind. The way we trace a line from star to star, as if a story could order the chaos, infinite expansion made to obey the laws of coloring books, as if the stars might never dim, never collapse. Wherever she goes, a singular searching, unshakable. The way that generations built their temples block by block, rocks seeming permanence, how we measure ourselves to the day ahead. Another place to excavate, another stretch of empty sky to fill up with our shapes. I've got one more. Thank you again, Sean, for hosting. Thank you, Matt, for your poems, and thank you everybody for coming out to listen tonight. This is not in the book. This is a newer poem that I'd like to end with. It's called The Fossil Record. Until now, I was never one of those kids obsessed with dinosaurs. Scientists say we find, with luck, maybe 40% of a specimen's bones and reconstruct the rest. A century of digging, entire careers of imagining limbs and skin, diet and teeth has recreated bone by resurrected bone an unknown species, a fearsome aquatic hunter, bigger than T-Rex. I say, let us all be one of those kids in paleo print jammies who memorize a million made-up names. Take Saturdays to gaze at skeletons strung together. Study forest floors for tracks preserved by ancient mud turned stone. Every bird on its perch discloses ways the dinosaurs never left at all. Bits of life, even extinction, couldn't kill. The news offers daily apocalypse, daily strife. So nightly, watch the sky and remember how much rubble there is to fall from space. Its height never faded to hold. Missiles swiveled to face our homes and glaciers loose a new flood's weight. Against such days, may we all become dinosaurs. Let us love the stories our bones will tell. Thank you.
All right. Great. The poem do lots, and we could certainly do worse than sit and listen. That was really nice. That was really great, Brian. Thank you. All right, take a sip of water. That's good. You earned it. All right, it's and the next guy getting up. All right, so it's now my pleasure to introduce our next poet, Nat W. Miller. He's an award-winning poet, born and raised in Lowell. His Most recent book, Tender is the River, just came in the mail for me today, and I can't wait to dig into it. I did get a little preview a reading a couple years ago of that poem of Guntercook. So if you're taking requests, that was one of my favorites. Anyway, that's the only one I know. He's also the author of The Wounded for the Water, Club Icarus, and Cameo Diner, published by Loom Press here in Lowell. His work has appeared in Slate, Harvard Review, and Poetry Daily, among others. He's taught creative writing and literature in a bunch of places, including Stanford, UMass Lowell, and the Concord State Prison. He teaches English, coaches football at Phillips Exeter. And joining us from the New Hampshire Seacoast tonight, please welcome Matt W. Miller.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Hope I can be heard. Really awesome to be here to read with Brian for the first time. We get to read together and share some of this stuff. And it's also annoying because as he's reading, I'm changing my play set because I got a poem that we'll talk to that poem, and now I don't know where to start. And then Sean, you come in with a gum to cook. I'm like, oh man, now I don't know where to start. And so I'm just gonna try to stick to what I did, but I'm gonna try to that last poem that you read, Brian, was amazing. Now it makes me wonder, this other long poem I have to read at the end now. So I wasn't sure, so now I'll have to do it. I'm gonna start. Yeah, Lowell poems. We got a lot of them here. This is the right crowd for it. Many of you. I'm going to start with a poem. This book is sort of a return, like Brian did in his first book, of returning back to the source, the river, the valley, the town, and trying to find, touch some of that magic and get it back again. So this first poem, it's one of the first poems in the book, is called Invocation at the Merrimack. And it's sort of like the narrator, poet, going to the river, trying to get back, trying to ask the river for a song. So I'll just kick it off with this. Invocation at the Merrimack. And now I take a tongue into your mud, into your syringe and soda bottle banks, to beg your braided silk, your Pennacook equay, your sliding tar of snake, your mouth of stones, your clavicle of royal and moan, your lover ghost thrown from Pawtucket Falls, your whitewater of bread and roses, your creak of locks and lifts, your leap from burning windows, your fished out crib of salmon and shiv, of shell casings and shad, alewife and boosted tires, your cradle of flywheel, of factory, your mill girl offering, your doffers, your biddies, your boom and your busted. Penitent, palmed, I stand in this, your sun-tussling dawn to call a song. My river, roll your blue-black big hips under the oxidized iron of cantilever and cable, deluge and slip bridge ribs and sing between the red brick and brackish heft of textile mills, churn art galleries with crack alleys. You, bender of flashboard pins, come, sing to me, sluice me, double back and seduce me to your flood, tenor me down to your Irish blood canals, your Greek restaurant ghettos, fluorescent Cambodian groceries, chunk hill Brazilian bakeries, your cobblestones exposed to sell some roomy history. Bones old and broken of flesh and sack and ash, I call a song. You ferried me home, now drink and spit me out where City Hall is crouched inside downtown's diverticula. Down to the fountain at JFK Plaza, where my brother was suckered by a kid I wouldn't hit back. And there, just one of 10 police stations, Pollard Library, and across Arcand Ave, Lowell High is field house named after our grandfather. The column Masonic Temple, the bring your own wine via tie and bars and bars and bars, one for every St. Anne's, Immaculate, and St. Patrick's. And your hydraulic drop prayers are tossed like toasted tilted pints. There, here, my palms unfold. Give willow to me against my flooded nights, against my broken rights. So you flow down and roll stones, old river, and moor me here for what I am not. Wake my song and pluck me to your pulse. I'll stay down in your valley, drink your ink of water and dream myself back into you. Make me small again. Roll me in your lap, your mud, your moonlit blood. Supplicated by the greasy vents of a train car diner, I beg your lip of water to whisper. So that sort of kicks off some of the themes of the poem. And then I'm going to answer the call response with Brian. He has this poem from Flaggy's Little League baseball poem. I'm gonna read a poem from Shed Park, where I played Little League. It sort of took place there, but
represent.
But it really takes place in a sort of outside of in a liquor store years later after Shed Park and after Little League, when my brother and I come back from college, we run into a guy we played Little League with, who's this beautiful ball player. And, you know, his life took a different turn, and we're sort of almost tourists in our town at this point in some ways. And, you know, we run into this guy who we're like, something's going on with his head, and realize he's got staples in his head from and he tells us from a machete wound. And he jokes about it. He's like, yeah, I got a machete wound at a party. I'm like, what? And, but I just, you know, it struck me, and it struck kind of changed the whole way we were seeing ourselves, and, you know, thinking of ourselves pretty bad. You know, we're like, whoa. So this one's called Boys Beyond June. It's a kind of a baseball poem. My brother and I played Little League with Marcus, and oh shit, that kid could hit. And just lights out at short, I mean, he balled and ran as mad as winter rivers. So when 10 years later, he walks into the Packy, where we're buying bourbon and a sleeve of dip, and see the staples holding together his cornrowed skull, we ask him, and he laughs, saying the dude or this girl he was banging whacked him from behind with a machete when he's walking out of a house party. And from the way he tells us, Marcus seems to feel that this was the worst part, like a move like that was rude or something. Like to jump out from the bushes behind porch steps was straight up punk. Another part in my hair is forever fucked, he says. And then he pays for his case of beast. Then we all bullshit our see you soons, and my brother and I walk out the door onto the busted concrete lot across from the auto body shop and see the lights leaking out from mini blinds of multifamily homes lining Concord Street. And we shake our heads and try to laugh the way that Marcus always laughed. Staring down Brad Pacheco, pitching him chin music with bases jacked, and all the dust, the sudden dusk, and all our summer still ahead of us. It's quite a number of poems in here are sort of about, not all of them, but about kind of boys in their struggle to become men and being lost along the way, and dealing with, you know, some of the toxic elements of finding, you know, American masculinity and what that all entails. And this is, I'm really nervous about reading this poem. Only Melissa the Ferocious is there, so I'm gonna read this because, you know, I got her support. Hopefully, because I actually was like, should this poem be in the book? Because it's about someone in Lowell, a friend of ours who he's a police officer in Lowell, and he's a great athlete, he's younger and really, you know, beautiful spirit, but he got, you know, he had some problems with alcohol. It's not uncommon in this town and in a lot of towns. And he one night driving home, you might know the story too. He killed somebody in a car accident and had to go, and he went to jail for it. He asked to go to jail for it. And that was so just a part of his life story. And I didn't ever want that to be his whole, that's what only thing to be remembered for. He was a father, he was a son of a cop in Lowell. And the cop in Lowell was one of the guys who, like, if you ever seen the movie The Fighter, was one of the guys that busted Mickey Ward's hand in an arrest. So he gets to play his father in the movie The Fighter. And it's kind of like this cool thing, but then, you know, things turn south up there. I'm just gonna read the poem. It's called Real Life, so it's sort of about the movies. Real Life VW. In The Fighter, Wahlberg plays a welterweight from Lowell named Mickey Ward. And Mickey, one night, sticking up for his crackhead half-brother Dickie, played by Christian Bale, gets his right hand busted by the cops, just like in real life. In the film, one of the cops is played by the real-life son of one of the cops, and he was, for his time, a cop in Lowell. I played football with him in high school. I can still see him all alone in the end zone after our tunnel vision QB threw it to me again on a tight end drag for a short yard gain. Great to see him play his dad, but I heard there were issues between them. And then to see him grin into the camera during those closing credit shots of the town and people. Hollywood come to us to find a hero. And though I never met Mickey, I saw him once at the gym. A few years later, well after the cameras tied it out of town, after Bale had made his Oscar speech, Dickie got popped again for stealing and dealing, and the cop I played ball with drove home one night so ripped, he never saw the SUV as he veered across Route 110 in Methuen. A man named Brian Paula died instantly. The cop, the boy I knew, was arrested, wept in court, asked to be punished, and went to jail. And none of this has anything to do with the movies, except that maybe everything has to do with the movies as we run alone into an October end zone, arms flailing, hoping someone will see that we are more than our falling action, more than this soft light flickering against the dark. So this one's a little less about Lowell and more about, this next one is more about sons in general and boys and how they grow up and do they get a chance to grow up. I had read this poem, Math, by Robin Costa Lewis, African-American poet. And the poem is a prose poem about the chances of a black kid, a black boy being able to grow up into adulthood and all this things stacked up against him to reach adulthood. And it got me thinking about sons in general and my own son and the advantages and disadvantages he has and the things that, the variables that come into play. And I don't know if anybody out there has ever played, probably hasn't, maybe David, but maybe like there's Brian, played Dungeons and Dragons when they were younger, but it's kind of this, role-playing game where you had all these different dice and one of the things, you have a 20-sided dice, which I still have. And there's a thing called a saving throw. And the saving throw, you roll it to see if like poison would kill you, if you turn into a zombie, or if, dragon breath would kill you. It's one of those, and you had to roll a certain number. So I took that idea, and then you adjust for variables. If you are strong, if you're super smart, you can adjust the variables up and down to see if you don't get destroyed by whatever the thing is. So I took Costa Lewis's poem and I took it into this kind of world of saving throw. So it's called Saving Throw. Take a boy, my boy. Understand mortality rates have been falling for decades. Understand there is no safer time to be alive, to be a boy, white boy, blue-eyed son. But understand there are three kinds of lies. Understand the anecdotal to be gospel. Take a boy to sign a number to his flesh. Assume the number is his chance of being taken, world murdered before he reaches manhood. Assume that number is 18. Assume his dad is a 20-sided die to live, roll an 18 or higher. Assume the wicked of this exercise. Now roll. Now adjust the roll for the variables. Add for American, not black, for American, not brown. Add for not the city I grew up in and its downtown, its buses, its oldie alleys behind liquor stores. Subtract for his art. Subtract for his tender heart. Subtract for velvet, heavy, velvet, hot, velvet, breathless sadness, for why he feels so sad sometimes. Divide for sex as gender, for who he is told he is by who he is supposed to love, who he might want to love. Divide him by love. Subtract for our anger, our MAGA, our gaslit nostalgia, for what it might mean to be a man in a world frothing toward war. Add for how rich, subtract for how poor. Multiply by privilege, square by systemics, fraction for fentanyl, COVID, for the PM 2.5 push into his lungs. Add for no belt, no switch, no father's fist. Add for no pistol in the house, subtract for lockdown drills, for AR-15s, bump stocks, Columbine copycats. Divide by the NRA, Big Pharma, bought lots at Yale and Harvard. Take away for the hate you give, the villainy you teach. Subtract for the anger of lost white boys, subtract for the cruel white boys, add for saintly boys in makeshift cathedrals. Add for my thick back, my tears, my laugh, subtract for my bark. Add for Isaac, subtract for Ishmael. Add for the strength of women, for his mother's love that might be enough all on its own. Take a boy, take all the boys, roll their bones. Sean, let me ask you, we started a little late. I don't want to go too long, so I don't.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the Q&A territory, but I don't know that we're going to have that much. So I think you should keep rolling, buddy.
I'm going to do this one. It's a longer poem. I'll just blast it out. It's because Brian read that last poem, and this is a sort of it's a sequence of poems. It's kind of a sonnet sequence where the last line of the first one is the first line of the next poem, and it all goes back around. So the last line in the last poem is basically the first line in the first poem. And it's a creation myth of the Merrimack River Valley. It starts with the Ice Age and leads into, and ends in the next Ice Age. And in between that is the indigenous tribes, the mill girls, all the stuff of Lowell, that's sort of history. And I'm just going to throw it out there. I think this is the crowd for it. If anybody would appreciate it and see how, and it's called the River Valley Hexamera. And a hexamera takes the Genesis story of the creation of the world, the 7-day story. So there's one day for every sun and heaven's one day. So River Valley Hexamera, Lunae, Monday. So the Laurentide is the last ice age, and this is where it starts. What happened was Laurentide ice ripped back like lightning, dragged its ass north, tearing loam from stone, stitching lenticular hills of till, birthing drumlin after drumlin, calving kettle ponds, and vining eskers across the earth like roid-roped veins. And then came water, shaking off the shaggy freeze, bursting for the sea again, and the river was our river, rolling down from white mountains, got bent against granite, and turned a hard tangle to the east to reach the rip and ride and sap, and down its banks were birch and ash and wolf and bee, 'cause sunlight lit upon the gulping dirt. At last all funk and feckin', and by the first evening, first tribes moved their breath upon the shore, called the water Marowak, saying it strong place. Martis, Tuesday. Called the water Marowak, sang its strong place. And in the spring, when herring and sturgeon returned, when salmon walked up waterfalls, they Pennacook, they Wamasett, they Narragansett, and Muskegon and Pawtucket, left grudge and axe in the grass and dove for the catch. They drank in Babskiag, they talked of Saba, they tracked spring deer from dawn through late summer, harvested the fall for winter, and spoke of pale men hailing down with their sideways sick and fire sticks. And Sagamore Passaconaway saw when their boats first launched, and now old, he tells his people they must bend against a storm, that the wind blows hard, that the old oak shakes and its branches are gone, and its sap is frozen, it bends, it falls. He says, peace with the white man is his final command. Mercury. Peace with the white man is his final command, because God is a motherfucker. Hell, we hammered canoes into coffins just by coughing into the river. So by the time we carried our Bibles up their banks, whole villages are empty, but with some bones and soil already sown, and pools of jumping shad, we only had to kick the still seething coals to get our fires going. While our kids played with dolls left behind by other days, and days rolled on, we figured ways to kill the Indian and still stay Puritan. Damn, King Philip practically made us a country, or rallied us rebellious enough to dunk a different king. And they came a big-ass canal from the Merrimack down to the Charles. And water was a will to power, especially when Lowell used a 5-finger discount to build a textile, make us industrial, then plant a town that taps in that old Pawtucket ass to power the loom that we let a woman work at every day. Lovis. Power the loom they let me work at every day. Save the Sabbath, save my soul. If I have to listen to that shataka machine shuttle through me from dawn to dinner, but debts are due on father's farm. And really there's great fun with these women. Although the rooms are small and 6 to a bed, but oh, to talk and rest my head on her warm hip when the whip of winter snaps the winter, when the hours go on forever, as we barter our flesh in hours for $1. Consumption is a factor. Last week, a child lost a finger, and yesterday our pay was cut. And now these papists, these French and Irish, even worse, these unhorsed Greeks slip through the brick and take our labor. But we really must all stand together against the way the work and wages worsen. So from toxic dust upon our tongues, chant, we want bread and roses too. Veneris. Upon rough tongues, a shout for bread and roses too. Spreads up and down the river from Lawrence to all the valley, so every weaver, tubercular fevered and hung with hunger, stood in bullets, bare-toed to the winter, even as mill boss cops beat down mothers, till at last the strikers got what we wanted, if only for a while, because the IWW moved on to hotter headlines, and the bosses whittled us away, and then the war, and even more of them took jobs south, and suddenly this town was down like too many others. Looked like the Kaiser bombed us back to brick and cobble. So before the bust, we were already busted. Even another German phalanx of fuckery was only faintly felt. By the 50s, we were riding gridiron gods, Riddick and Plomeritis, even some back named Kerouac, just to have something to cheer for in damp November. Saturini. Just to have something to cheer for in damp November. Of a city ain't no small thing. And when the new jobs come, we make a run of making work, but Wang flared out and gangs rolled in like TRG and Latin Kings and new tribes fishing for the American scene, Brazilian, Puerto Rican, and Cambodian, but still too many got lost on no jobs or dope. But there was crack you couldn't smoke, a light in which the city woke to what it was, what a valley could be, where art and history might be milled into handmaidens of hope. And so a celebration of self sort of slipped in. along with that flood of OxyContin. But that something sure ain't nothing, and the river's cleaner than it's been for years, and Hawk and Heron are returning, and even Hollywood shut up for Mickey. For real, could a town and river ever be more like Mickey, more like Ward versus Gotti? Solus, could a town be ever more like Ward versus Gotti? The way they pounded, the way they danced, they hugged us into Sunday rope-a-dope rest to look upon the mess we made along our way to love or money, and too many bodies rolled over these falls, and too much of earth that cannot be called back. But maybe there's time here for breath and prayer, to name what's holy there and there, before the burn of us is snuffed. Perhaps there's no foot upon the treadle, no fingers at the loom, just the random warp and weft, before a doom unto which we will not know we moved. And all the beauty of seeing beauty will be tombed, all sorrow for the sins gone as dark as a sunless moon. But I am Nightshade, and I love the luster that comes last, in the lightning way the ice rips back. Thank you. Gotta push
Wow.
that out there.
I want that on like 7, like, monoliths by the river somewhere or something.
Ooh,
That's, you covered it, man. That was beautiful.
thank you.
If folks want to come off mute, you can certainly do so and ask a question or put something in the chat or yell or cheer or throw some noisemakers around. Jeez, my breath is taken away with that. So what is that form? I've never heard of that form. I know you probably introduced it. I just missed it.
Yeah, I called
The,
it hexamera. I think it's like a
Hexamera.
Latin word, or it's kind of a play on a word. Actually, Brandon Courtney is this poet I know. He did one in his book This Sisyphus, and I just kind of borrowed. His is way better, but I just like took that form. Like, I'm gonna do the 7 sonnet sequence and just kind of create this, Lowell, Merrimack Valley sonnet crown creation myth.
Yeah. It should be better. It's got a little bit of salt in it, though. I don't know if the
I
kids
can-
walking by would want to see it.
You'll take some of the salt out.
You tell it true.
Oh, I saw Brian's kids are there. I was like, I'm gonna swear. I actually had to read this morning in my son's middle school, and I was pulling back on some words. Not for that. I didn't do that poem, but some other things.
You learn how to swear quick in Lowell, just like under you, it's just part of like the, screw, whatever. It's all good.
You should listen to Melissa DeRoche swear. It's an art form.
Sure, come off mute.
It's my voice. When you hear me swear with this voice, it's hysterical. And I am a middle school teacher, so I've got it down perfectly. That was great,
Nice.
Matt. You did a great job. And I apologize. I came in a little late, so I missed the first, but congratulations to all of you this was awesome. So good.
Thanks. I'm gonna stop the recording, and I'm not gonna stop